My name is Arlene, and I am 54 years old. I still remember standing in my daughter's new living room, holding a glass of sparkling water, watching her thank the wrong woman for the roof over her head. My daughter stood there radiant and grateful, telling 50 people that her mother-in-law had bought them their dream home. I said nothing. I just smiled. 2 days later, the bank called her, and everything she thought she knew came crashing down. Before I share what happened next, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if stories about family sacrifice and the truth that eventually comes to light speak to your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. What I am about to tell you changed everything between me and my daughter, and I believe it might just change how you see the quiet sacrifices in your own life too. I need to take you back to the beginning so you can understand how we got to that moment at the housewarming party. My story starts long before that night in a small town in Ohio where I raised my daughter completely on my own. My husband Douglas passed away when our daughter Meredith was just 12 years old. He was a construction worker, a good man with calloused hands and a gentle heart. One morning he kissed me goodbye, told me he would pick up milk on the way home, and I never saw him alive again. A beam collapsed at the worksite. They told me it was instant that he did not suffer. I do not know if that was true, or if they just said it to comfort a widow who could not stop shaking. After Douglas died, I had to figure out how to be everything for Meredith. I was already working as a nurse at the local hospital, but I picked up extra shifts, night shifts, weekend shifts, holiday shifts. I missed school plays and soccer games. I heated up frozen dinners more times than I care to admit. But I kept our little 2-bedroom house, and I kept my daughter fed and clothed and loved the best way I knew how. That house was nothing fancy. Just over 1,000 square feet, with a kitchen that had not been updated since 1982, and a backyard that turned into a mud pit every spring. But it was ours. Douglas and I had bought it together when Meredith was just a baby, and after he died, paying off that mortgage became my mission. It took me 18 years, but I did it. The day I made that final payment, I sat on my front porch and cried for an hour. Not from sadness, but from the sheer relief of knowing that no matter what happened, my daughter and I had a home. Meredith was a good child. She understood from a young age that we did not have much, but she never complained. When other kids got brand new bikes, she smiled at her second-hand one and said she liked that it had character. When her friends went on expensive vacations, she told me that our camping trips to the state park were more fun anyway. I do not know if she really believed those things, or if she was just protecting my feelings, but either way, I loved her fiercely for it. One memory stays with me from when Meredith was about 14. It was Mother's Day, and she handed me a card she had made herself. Construction paper glitter glue the works. Inside, in her careful handwriting, she had written a promise. She said that when she grew up and got a good job, she was going to buy me a big, beautiful house with a garden and a porch swing. She said I deserved to rest, that I had worked hard enough for 10 lifetimes. I still have that card in a box in my closet. I take it out sometimes when I need to remember who my daughter really is underneath everything that happened later. I raised Meredith to be independent. I taught her to change a tire balance, a checkbook, and never rely on anyone else to take care of her. When she got accepted to college to study accounting, I was so proud I thought my heart might burst. I had been saving money for her education since she was a baby, squirreling away $20 here and $50 there. And by the time she graduated high school, I had enough to cover most of her tuition. We took out a small loan for the rest, and she worked part-time to cover her living expenses. She graduated with honors, and I sat in the audience with tears streaming down my face, thinking that all those night shifts had been worth it. After college, Meredith got a job at an accounting firm in Columbus. It was about an hour from our little town, far enough that she could not come home every weekend, but close enough that I did not feel like I was losing her completely. She called me every Sunday night, and we would talk for an hour about her work, her apartment, her dreams for the future. Those phone calls were the highlight of my week. Then she met Brandon Collins. Brandon came from a different world than we did. His father owned a car dealership, one of those big ones with the inflatable gorillas and the radio commercials that play during every commercial break. His mother, Gloria, was what you might call a professional socialite. She had never worked a day in her life, at least not for a paycheck, but she was very busy with her charity luncheons and country club memberships and making sure everyone knew exactly how successful her family was. When Meredith first told me about Brandon, I had my concerns. Not about him specifically, because he seemed polite enough when I met him. But I worried about the difference in their backgrounds. I worried that Meredith might feel like she was not good enough, or that his family might look down on her or on me. But Meredith assured me that Brandon was different from his parents. She said he was kind and hard-working, and that he loved her for who she was not, for where she came from. They dated for 2 years before getting engaged. The wedding was 3 years ago, and it was beautiful, if a bit more elaborate than I would have chosen. Gloria wanted to pay for the whole thing. She kept insisting that it was traditional for the groom's family to contribute, and she made it clear that she wanted the wedding to reflect well on the Collins name. I put my foot down about paying for half. It took almost everything I had saved, but I was not about to let my daughter walk down the aisle feeling like she owed her new family everything. That was the first time I noticed the shift in Meredith. During the wedding planning, she started deferring to Gloria more and more. Gloria had opinions about the flowers, the venue, the guest list, the menu. And Meredith went along with all of it, even when I could tell she did not really agree. When I tried to offer my own suggestions, Meredith would smile and say she would think about it. But somehow Gloria's ideas always won out. After the wedding, the phone calls became less frequent. Instead of every Sunday, it was every other week, then once a month. When we did talk, Meredith seemed distracted. She talked a lot about Gloria, about the dinners at Gloria's house, about the shopping trips Gloria took her on, about the advice Gloria gave her about marriage and life. I tried not to feel jealous. I told myself that it was natural for a young wife to bond with her mother-in-law. I told myself that I should be grateful Meredith had another maternal figure in her life, someone who could give her things I never could. But there was one conversation that stuck with me. It was about a year after the wedding, and we were all at Gloria's house for some holiday gathering. I was standing in the kitchen helping with the dishes when Gloria walked in. She looked at me with this smile that did not quite reach her eyes and said something that has echoed in my mind ever since. She said it must be so nice for Meredith to have 2 mothers who love her, even if their circumstances are so different. She said it in this sweet voice, like she was paying me a compliment, but I heard what she really meant. She was reminding me that she could give Meredith things I could not. She was putting me in my place. I did not say anything. I just smiled and kept drying the dishes. That night, I drove home to my little house and sat in the dark for a long time, wondering if I was losing my daughter to a woman who had designer handbags and a 4-car garage. About a year ago, Meredith mentioned to me that she and Brandon were hoping to buy a house. They had been renting a small apartment since the wedding, and Meredith wanted something with a yard, a place where they could eventually raise children. She described her dream home to me in such detail. A craftsman-style house with a big front porch, hardwood floors, a kitchen with natural light, and a backyard with enough space for a garden and maybe a swing set someday. The problem was money. Brandon worked at his father's dealership, but he was not making the kind of salary you might expect. His father believed in making his children earn their way up, which I respected in theory. Meredith's accounting job paid decently, but not extravagantly. Together, they could afford their rent and their car payments and their student loans, but saving for a down payment on a house was slow going. I started thinking about what I could do to help. My little house had appreciated in value over the years, partly because of the neighborhood improving, and partly because I had put so much work into maintaining it. I called a real estate agent, a woman named Sandra, who had been a patient of mine years ago, and asked her to give me an estimate. She walked through the house, made some notes, and told me she thought she could sell it for around $180,000. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and made a decision. I was going to sell my house and use the money to help Meredith buy hers. I was 53 years old, healthy, with a modest pension from my nursing career. I did not need a 2-bedroom house all to myself. I could rent a small apartment, one of those places designed for seniors, with a little kitchenette and a community room where I could play cards with other retirees. It would be fine. It would be more than fine. It would be worth it to see my daughter in the home of her dreams. I did not tell anyone about my plan. Not Meredith, not Brandon, not even my sister Francine, who I usually told everything. This was going to be my gift. My secret. My way of proving that a mother's love does not depend on how much money she makes or what kind of car she drives. Gloria might be able to take Meredith on shopping sprees and vacations to Florida, but I was going to give my daughter something real, something permanent, a foundation for her future. Sandra listed my house in early spring, and within 2 months, we had a buyer. A young couple just starting out, who reminded me of Douglas and me all those years ago. I accepted their offer of $175,000 after all the fees and taxes were settled. It was enough. Around the same time, Meredith called me excitedly to tell me that she and Brandon had found the perfect house. It was a craftsman style, just like she had always wanted in a nice neighborhood with good schools. The asking price was $320,000. They were trying to figure out how to make it work, but they did not have nearly enough for a down payment. I made some phone calls. I found out which bank was handling the mortgage and scheduled an appointment with a loan officer named Patricia. She was a kind woman about my age, with reading glasses perched on her nose and family photos covering her desk. I explained my situation. I told her I wanted to put down $100,000 on my daughter's house, but I did not want Meredith or anyone else to know it came from me. I wanted the paperwork to show Meredith's name, not mine. I wanted this to be anonymous. Patricia looked at me for a long moment. Then she smiled and said that in all her years at the bank, she had never seen a mother do something like this. She promised to keep my secret. We worked out the details together, making sure everything was legal and above board, while still protecting my anonymity. The $100,000 would go toward the down payment, making the mortgage payments manageable for Meredith and Brandon. I kept $75,000 for myself, enough to cover my rent and expenses for several years, if I was careful. I moved out of my house the week before the new owners took possession. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment in a senior living community about 20 minutes from Meredith's new neighborhood. It was small but clean, with a balcony overlooking a courtyard garden. I told everyone I was downsizing because the house was too much work for one person. Meredith praised my practical thinking. She had no idea that the house I had lived in for nearly 30 years was now going to become the foundation of her dream. When Meredith called to tell me the mortgage had been approved, she was over the moon. She said she could not believe how smoothly everything had gone, that the bank had been so accommodating, that somehow the numbers had just worked out. I listened to her happy voice and felt a warmth spread through my chest. This was what I had worked for. This was why I had taken all those extra shifts and skipped all those vacations and worn the same winter coat for 15 years. So that my daughter could have this moment. I never expected a thank you. I never expected recognition. I just wanted to know that I had done something meaningful for the person I loved most in the world, That was supposed to be enough. A few weeks before Meredith and Brandon closed on the house, Gloria found out about the purchase. I do not know exactly how the conversation went, but I can imagine it. Brandon probably mentioned to his mother that they were buying a house, and Gloria probably asked how they could afford such a nice place on their salaries. Brandon, who did not know about my contribution, probably said something vague about the financing working out better than expected. Gloria drew her own conclusions. She assumed that she was the reason things had worked out, because she had always told Brandon that she would help him when the time came. A few days after that conversation, Gloria transferred $20,000 into Brandon's bank account with a note that said it was for the new house. Brandon and Meredith were thrilled. They assumed that $20,000 was the down payment that had made everything possible. They had no idea about the $100,000 that had come before it. And Gloria, whether intentionally or not, did nothing to correct their assumption. In fact, she started telling people that she had bought her son and daughter-in-law their house. She mentioned it at her book club. She told the women at her church. She even posted something on social media about how blessed she was to be able to help her children achieve their dreams. The story spread. By the time the housewarming party rolled around, everyone in Gloria's circle believed that she had single-handedly made this house happen. I started noticing changes in how Meredith talked to me. She called less often, and when she did call, Gloria's name came up constantly. Gloria had helped her pick out furniture. Gloria had recommended a landscaper. Gloria had given her advice about the neighborhood. Every conversation felt like a reminder that someone else was playing the role of helpful mother, while I was just a voice on the other end of the phone. One evening, about a week before the housewarming party, I asked Meredith a gentle question about how they had managed the down payment. I was not fishing for credit. I was just curious what she thought had happened. Meredith laughed and said that Gloria had taken care of everything. She said they were so lucky to have Gloria in their lives that not everyone had a mother-in-law who was so generous. I felt something crack inside me. Not break, not yet, but crack. Like a hairline fracture in a bone that you do not notice until you put weight on it. I wanted to tell her the truth right then. I wanted to say that Gloria's $20,000 was a nice gift, but the real down payment, the money that had made the whole thing possible, had come from selling the only home I had ever known. But I did not say anything. I told myself that the truth would come out eventually. I told myself that Meredith would learn what really happened and would understand why I had kept it secret. I told myself that patience was a virtue. There was a family dinner a few days later at Gloria's house, of course, to celebrate the upcoming move. I sat at the long dining table surrounded by Brandon's relatives and a few of Meredith's friends who had been invited for some reason. Gloria held court at the head of the table, accepting congratulations and praise for her generosity. At one point, one of Brandon's aunts raised a glass and toasted to Gloria for being such a wonderful mother-in-law. Gloria pretended to be embarrassed, but I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. Meredith caught my eye across the table and smiled. I smiled back. But inside I was counting the days until the truth would come out, until my daughter would know that her mother had not just stood on the sidelines. I did not want to make a scene. I did not want to embarrass Meredith or create conflict in her new family. But the crack inside me was getting deeper. The housewarming party was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon, 2 weeks after Meredith and Brandon had officially moved in. Meredith had been planning it for weeks, obsessing over the guest list and the catering and the decorations. She wanted everything to be perfect. She wanted to show off her new home to everyone who mattered. I was invited, of course. But when I asked if I could help with the preparations, Meredith hesitated. She said that Gloria had already offered to come early and help set up, and she did not want to overwhelm the kitchen with too many helpers. She said I should just come at the regular time and enjoy myself as a guest. I told her that was fine, that I understood that I was looking forward to seeing the house all decorated. But I hung up the phone feeling like I had been politely told to stay out of the way. On the day of the party, I put on my nicest dress, a deep blue one that Douglas had always said brought out my eyes. I drove to Meredith's new neighbourhood, past the well-manicured lawns and the children riding bicycles, and pulled up to the craftsman-style house that my sacrifice had made possible. It was beautiful. White trim, a stone pathway leading to the front porch, hanging baskets overflowing with flowers. I sat in my car for a moment, just looking at it, feeling proud and sad at the same time. When I walked up to the front door, Gloria was already there, greeting guests like she was the hostess. She was wearing a cream-coloured pantsuit and pearls, her hair freshly styled, her smile wide and practiced. She welcomed me warmly enough, but there was something in her eyes that felt like triumph. She knew, or thought she knew, that she had won some competition I had not even realised we were having. Inside the house was filled with people. Colleagues of Meredith and Brandon, neighbours, relatives from both sides, friends from college. There must have been 50 people there, milling around with drinks and appetizers, admiring the built-in bookshelves and the original hardwood floors. I wandered through the rooms, accepting compliments on Meredith's behalf, trying to feel like I belonged. But I kept getting strange looks. People would glance at me, then look away, like they were not sure who I was or why I was there. At one point, an older woman asked me which side of the family I was from. When I said I was Meredith's mother, she looked surprised. She said she had heard so much about Gloria, but did not realize there was another mother in the picture. I smiled and said nothing. The worst part came in the middle of the party when Meredith stood up to make a speech. Brandon stood beside her, his arm around her waist, beaming with pride. Meredith thanked everyone for coming, thanked the neighbours for their welcome, thanked their friends for the housewarming gifts. Then she paused and looked directly at Gloria. "I want to give a special thank you," she said to my mother-in-law, Gloria. "This house would not have been possible without her. She believed in us when we were not sure we could make it happen. She turned our dream into a reality, and we will never be able to repay her for her generosity. Thank you, Mom Gloria, for buying us our dream home." The room erupted in applause. Gloria dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, accepting hugs and congratulations from the people around her. Meredith rushed over to embrace her mother-in-law, and I watched as they stood together, framed by the fireplace I had paid for, surrounded by the walls that held my secret. At the very end of her speech, almost as an afterthought, Meredith added that she also wanted to thank her mom, Arlene, for always being there. That was it. One sentence. No elaboration. No mention of the 30 years I had spent preparing her for this moment. Just a quick acknowledgement before she moved on to talk about the caterer. I stood near the back of the room, my glass of sparkling water shaking in my hand. I felt like everyone was looking at me, wondering why this other mother was there, the one who apparently had not done anything worth mentioning. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab Meredith by the shoulders and tell her what I had given up for her. But I did not. I just smiled. I had gotten very good at smiling when I felt like dying inside. Later, I slipped out to the backyard, away from the noise and the congratulations, and Gloria's voice accepting praise she did not deserve. I found a bench near the back fence and sat down alone. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and I watched it without really seeing it. All I could think about was that card Meredith had made me when she was 14. The one where she promised to buy me a big, beautiful house someday. I had kept that promise for her instead, and she did not even know it. My sister Francine found me out there. She had been inside watching everything unfold, and her face was tight with anger when she sat down beside me. She demanded to know what was going on. She said she had seen the way Gloria was acting, the way Meredith had barely mentioned me. She wanted to march back inside and set the record straight. I grabbed her arm and begged her not to. I told her I would handle it myself, in my own time. I did not want to ruin Meredith's party. I did not want my daughter to be embarrassed in front of all those people. Even after everything, I was still protecting her. Even when she did not know she needed protecting. Even when the person she needed protecting from was herself. I left the party early without saying goodbye. I drove back to my little apartment and sat in the dark, listening to the silence. I thought about Douglas, about what he would say if he could see how things had turned out. I thought about all the years I had worked and sacrificed, and I wondered if any of it had mattered. For the first time in my life, I questioned whether loving someone completely was worth the cost. The 2 days after the housewarming party were the longest of my life. I did not call Meredith, and she did not call me. I suppose she was busy with thank you notes and unpacking and basking in the glow of her new home. I spent those days in my apartment replaying the party in my mind, trying to convince myself that I had done the right thing by staying quiet. Francine called me 3 times, each time more insistent that I needed to tell Meredith the truth. She said I was letting Gloria steal credit for something she had not done. She said Meredith deserved to know what her real mother had sacrificed. I told her I was not ready. I told her I needed to think. The truth was, I was afraid. Afraid that even if Meredith knew the truth, it would not change how she saw Gloria. Afraid that my sacrifice would seem small compared to Gloria's polished image. Afraid that I had already lost my daughter, and there was nothing I could do to get her back. On the second day, everything changed. It was late morning when my phone rang. It was Meredith, and I could tell immediately that something was wrong. Her voice was trembling, confused, like she had just woken up from a nightmare, and was not sure what was real. She said the bank had called her. She said a woman named Patricia had needed to verify some paperwork related to the mortgage. And in the course of that conversation, Patricia had mentioned the down payment. The $100,000 down payment that had been deposited from my account. Meredith was barely coherent. She kept asking me what that meant. She said Gloria had given them $20,000. She said that was supposed to be the down payment. She did not understand where $100,000 had come from, or why it was connected to my name. I took a deep breath and told her the truth. I told her that I had sold my house, the house where I had raised her, the house where her father had lived before he died. I told her that I had used the money to make a down payment on her dream home, that I had done it anonymously because I wanted it to be a gift, not a transaction. I told her that I had kept the secret because I thought it did not matter who got the credit as long as she was happy. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Meredith started crying. She asked me why I had not told her. She asked me where I was living now. She said she did not understand, that she thought I had just wanted to downsize, that she had no idea I had given up everything for her. I told her that a mother's job is not to be thanked. A mother's job is to love her child and give her the best possible start in life. I told her that I did not need recognition or praise. But then I said something that surprised even me. I said that watching her thank another woman for my sacrifice had hurt more than I expected. I said that standing in that room feeling invisible had made me question whether my love had been enough. Meredith sobbed on the phone. She kept saying she was sorry over and over, like the words could somehow undo what had happened. I told her it was not her fault. She had believed what she was told. She had no reason to think Gloria was anything but honest. But I also told her that I could not pretend it did not hurt. Some wounds need to be acknowledged before they can heal. After we hung up, Meredith called Gloria. I was not there for that conversation, but I heard about it later. Meredith asked Gloria directly how much money she had contributed to the house. Gloria tried to deflect at first, saying that money was not important, that what mattered was the love behind the gift. But Meredith pressed her, and finally Gloria admitted that she had given $20,000, not $100,000. Not enough for a down payment on a $320,000 house, just $20,000. Meredith asked Gloria why she had let everyone believe she had paid for the whole house. Gloria's answer was revealing. She said she had never technically lied. She had never said the exact words that she had paid for everything. She had just let people draw their own conclusions. She had just accepted the praise that came her way without correcting anyone's assumptions. Brandon was in the room when this conversation happened. According to Meredith, he had never seen his mother so uncomfortable. He had grown up believing that Gloria was generous and kind, that her charity work and community involvement reflected a genuinely good heart. But watching her squirm under Meredith's questions, he realized that his mother was capable of something he had never expected. She was capable of taking credit for someone else's love. That evening, Meredith and Brandon had a long conversation. She told him everything I had shared with her. She told him about Douglas dying when she was 12, about me working double shifts for decades, about me paying for her college, about me selling my home so that she could have one of her own. Brandon was stunned. He said he had no idea. He said he felt terrible for not asking more questions, for assuming that everything had happened the way his mother implied. For the first time in their marriage, Brandon sided with Meredith against his mother. For the first time, he saw Gloria not as the generous benefactor she pretended to be, but as a woman who had allowed another mother's sacrifice to be erased. I did not plan what happened next. For so many years I had made myself small. I had stayed quiet when Gloria made her comments. I had smiled when I felt like crying. I had convinced myself that being a good mother meant being invisible, that my love would speak for itself without me ever having to say a word. But somewhere in those 2 days, between the party and the phone call, something shifted inside me. I realized that silence was not the same as strength. I realized that letting other people take credit for my sacrifice was not humility. It was self-abandonment. I had spent so long protecting everyone else's feelings that I had forgotten I was allowed to have feelings of my own. I called Gloria and asked her to meet me for coffee. She agreed, though I could hear the nervousness in her voice. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, the kind of place with exposed brick and mismatched chairs. Gloria was already there when I arrived, sitting ramrod straight, her designer purse on the table like a shield between us. I did not yell. I did not accuse. I just spoke calmly and clearly about what had happened. I told her that I had worked for 30 years as a nurse, that I had raised my daughter alone, that I had gone without vacations and new clothes and dinners out so that Meredith could have everything she needed. I told her that I had sold the only home I had ever known, so that my daughter could have a home of her own. I told her that watching her accept praise for my sacrifice had been one of the most painful experiences of my life. Gloria tried to interrupt several times, but I kept going. I told her that I was not there to demand an apology, though an apology would be appropriate. I was there to make sure she understood something important. I told her that I did not need her money, or her status, or her approval. I had given my daughter something that could not be bought in a store, or bragged about at a country club. I had given her my life's work, my security, my future. And I would not allow that gift to be claimed by someone who had contributed less than a quarter of what I had. When I finished, Gloria was quiet. She looked smaller somehow, like the air had gone out of her. She said she had never thought about it that way. She said she had gotten caught up in the excitement and the praise, and had not considered what it might feel like from my perspective. It was not quite an apology, but it was more self-awareness than I had ever seen from her. I told her I did not need her to be my friend. I did not need her to like me or approve of me. But I did need her to stop taking credit for things she had not done. I needed her to acknowledge, at least to herself, that there were other forms of love besides the kind that comes with a price tag. 2 days after that conversation, Meredith came to see me. She had never been to my new apartment before, and I saw her face change as she walked through the door. She looked around at the small living room, the compact kitchen, the single bedroom that was half the size of her new master suite. She realized, perhaps for the first time, what I had given up. She stood in the middle of my living room and started crying. She said she could not believe she had been so blind. She said she had gotten so caught up in trying to impress Gloria and fit into Brandon's family that she had forgotten who had been there for her all along. She said she was ashamed of the speech she had given at the party, ashamed that she had thanked the wrong person for the roof over her head. I held my daughter while she cried. I stroked her hair the way I had when she was a little girl having a nightmare. And I told her what I had told myself 1,000 times. I told her that being a mother means loving your child even when it hurts. It means giving without expecting anything in return. It means watching them make mistakes and waiting for them to find their way back. We talked for hours that day. Meredith told me things she had never shared before. She admitted that she had always felt inadequate around Gloria, always worried that she was not polished enough or sophisticated enough to be part of the Collins family. She said she had been performing for so long that she had forgotten who she really was, and she said that finding out about my sacrifice had woken her up, had reminded her of the values she had grown up with, the values I had taught her. Before she left, Meredith asked if there was anything she could do to make things right. I told her there was one thing. I asked her to tell the truth. Not to punish Gloria, but to honor what had really happened. I asked her to let people know that her mother, the nurse from Ohio, had given everything she had so that her daughter could have a home. A week later, Meredith posted something on social media. It was long and heartfelt, and it told the whole story. She wrote about me working night shifts and paying for her college and selling my house without telling anyone. She wrote about her own blindness and Gloria's misleading acceptance of credit. She wrote about what it means to be truly loved by a mother who never asked for anything in return. The responses poured in. People I had never met sent me messages telling me I was an inspiration. Meredith's friends reached out to apologize for the confusion at the housewarming party. Even some of Gloria's acquaintances contacted me to say they had no idea and that they admired what I had done. Gloria posted something too, eventually. It was shorter than Meredith's post, but it acknowledged the truth. She admitted that she had allowed people to believe something that was not accurate. She said she was sorry for any pain she had caused. It was not the most gracious apology I have ever received, but it was something. It was a start. Brandon invited me to dinner at their house. He sat across from me at the table I had helped pay for in the dining room that existed because of my sacrifice, and he apologized. He said he should have asked more questions. He said he should have noticed that something was off with his mother's story. He said he was grateful for everything I had done for his wife, and by extension, for him. Then he asked me to move in with them. He said they had plenty of room, that the guest bedroom could be mine. I smiled and thanked him, but I said no. I had grown to appreciate my independence, my little apartment, with its quiet mornings and its view of the garden. I told him I would visit often, but I needed my own space. I had spent my whole life taking care of others. Now I wanted to learn what it felt like to take care of myself. It has been 6 months since that phone call from the bank changed everything. I wish I could say that the healing was instant, that learning the truth immediately repaired all the damage that had been done. But that is not how real life works. Real healing takes time. It comes in waves, sometimes washing away the pain and sometimes bringing it rushing back. In the weeks after the truth came out, I struggled. I would wake up in the middle of the night, replaying the housewarming party in my mind, remembering the feeling of standing invisible in my daughter's new home. I would wonder if I should have spoken up sooner, if my silence had somehow caused all of this, if I had taught Meredith that my feelings did not matter by never expressing them. But slowly, with time and reflection, I began to see things differently. I started attending a book club at my apartment complex, where I met other women my age who had their own stories of sacrifice and strength. I started taking walks in the morning, watching the sunrise over the courtyard garden, appreciating the simple beauty of being alive. I started writing in a journal, something I had never done before, and I discovered that putting my feelings into words helped me understand them better. The relationship between me and Meredith is different now. Better, I think, though, also more honest. She calls me every day sometimes, just for a few minutes to check in. We go to lunch together every week, just the two of us. No Gloria, no Brandon, no one else. We talk about things we never discussed before. She asks me questions about her father, about my life before she was born, about the dreams I had when I was her age. She is getting to know me as a person, not just as a mother. And me, I am getting to know myself too. For so long, my identity was wrapped up in being Meredith's mother, Douglas's widow, the nurse who worked double shifts to pay the bills. I did not know who I was outside of those roles. But now, living alone in my little apartment, I am discovering things about myself. I like jazz music. I enjoy gardening, even if my garden is just a few pots on the balcony. I am learning to cook dishes I never had time for when I was working complex recipes that require attention and patience. Gloria and I have reached a kind of peace. We are not friends, and I do not think we ever will be. But we can be in the same room without tension. She no longer makes comments about our different circumstances. She no longer implies that her contributions are worth more than mine. We are two women who both love the same young woman, and we have learned to respect each other's place in her life. Meredith told me recently that she is pregnant. I am going to be a grandmother. When she shared the news, she was sitting in my apartment on the second-hand couch I bought when I moved in. She took my hands and told me that she wanted her child to know me, really know me. She said she wanted to raise her baby with the same values I had taught her, values of hard work and sacrifice and love that does not keep score. I cried when she told me. Not sad tears, but grateful ones. All those years of working and saving and giving, all those moments of feeling invisible and unappreciated, they had led to this. They had led to my daughter sitting in front of me, her hand on her belly, promising to pass on everything I had taught her. I have thought a lot about what this whole experience has taught me. The biggest lesson is this. Silence is not always golden. Sometimes staying quiet is not humble or selfless. Sometimes it is a way of disappearing, of letting other people write your story for you. I spent so long believing that good mothers do not ask for recognition, that true love does not need to be acknowledged. But I was wrong. Everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves to have their sacrifices honored, even if they never asked for it. The other lesson is about forgiveness, both giving it and receiving it. I have forgiven Gloria for taking credit she did not earn. I have forgiven Meredith for not seeing what was right in front of her. And most importantly, I have forgiven myself for staying silent for so long. We are all doing the best we can with what we know. Sometimes we make mistakes. What matters is what we do when we realize we were wrong. If you are watching this and you have ever felt invisible, if you have ever sacrificed for someone you love without being thanked, I want you to know that your love matters. It matters even if no one sees it. It matters even if no one says thank you. But I also want you to know that you are allowed to speak up. You are allowed to tell your story. You are allowed to stand in the light and say, "This is what I did. This is what I gave. This is who I am." The bank called my daughter, and everything changed. But the truth is, the bank did not reveal anything new. It just brought into the light what had always been there in the dark: a mother's love, a lifetime of sacrifice, a gift that was given in secret and finally received. I want to ask you something before we end. Have you ever stayed silent when you should have spoken up? Have you ever watched someone else take credit for something you did? What did you do about it? Or what do you wish you had done? Please share your story in the comments. I read every single one. And I believe that when we share our experiences, we help each other heal. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more stories about family sacrifice and the complicated, beautiful mess of loving each other. And remember, no matter what you have been through, you deserve to be seen. Thank you for spending this time with me. I am Arlene, and this has been my story. Until next time, take care of yourself and the people you love, but do not forget to let them take care of you too.